I just want to pick up on the last video I made, which was to do with the way the patterns of activation work in the brain, and how that activation pattern kind of sweeps through various regions of the brain, which kind of instantiate different concepts. So, as I'm thinking about a tree, there's a pattern of activation which is moving through my brain, moving through an area broadly speaking representative of a tree. Well, probably lots of different areas actually, if I'm simplifying for a sec. Sweeping through that particular area of my brain to do with trees, and then sweeping out into other areas. So as I sweep into tree, I can think of bird, I can think of bird flying in the sky, I can think of a variety of things, or alternatively I can kind of move my thoughts towards this area of my brain which has the concept tree in it, and now it's moving out the other side into stuff to do with wood, paper making, logging, that kind of thing, or indeed into a tree and out into Deleuze-Guattari, or out into trees as metaphors for different kinds of cladistic structures, that kind of thing. So this is this idea. It's kind of stream of consciousness thing, but consciousness here is a process, or a series of processes, activation patterns, sweeping into and out of various regions of the brain which represent in some way concepts. And as I said in the last video, one of the interesting things about that is well, two things. It's the trajectories in and out which provide salience and meaning for the concept. You know, whether that tree becomes a tree to do with metaphor, or whether it's a tree to do with paper making, or a tree to do with birds, depends on the trajectory of my thoughts in and out of that concept. And secondly, that the activation patterns anticipate the future. They anticipate the directions out of that. Those neurons that lead out of that tree neuron, if you can simplify it like that, start to be activated in multiple pathways out, start to be activated prior to my conscious awareness of that, my conscious adopting of any of those particular pathways as part of my stream of thought. And as I said earlier, there's this kind of probability gradients, probability landscape that the thought follows as it goes through that concept. So I was talking about that again. Oh yeah, okay. What that reminded me of actually was to do with time, and to do with Husserl, and perhaps to do with Whitehead, I guess. But Husserl primarily, because Husserl was talking about time. He says that our experience of now, this present moment, the species present, as James calls it, the remembered present, as Edelman calls it, this moment of now that we're experiencing, according to Husserl, contains elements of the past and elements of the future, of the not now, as he calls it, and of the not yet now. Well, he doesn't call it that because he wasn't speaking English, but that's how it's roughly how it's translated. The not now and the not yet now are embedded within the now. So our moment-to-moment experience of nowness isn't a dimensionless point, kind of like a slice through an old-fashioned videotape. It's more like a couple of inches of tape whizzing past the read-write head. And each moment contains little bits of the past and little bits of the future. And Husserl says that's pretty obvious because, I mean, he cites music as that. When you listen to a piece of music, you don't hear each note individually in and of itself. What you hear is, when you're hearing that particular note, you're kind of hearing the lead in, and you're kind of anticipating the lead out. And in fact, the enjoyment, at least part of the enjoyment, of a piece of music, is in the kind of shape of that particular moment, and the shape of the lead in, the shape of the lead out, and how those things sequence over the course of an entire composition. And similarly with sentences, we don't hear one word and then hear the next word, or hear a fragment of a word followed by the fragment of the next word. we have the few moments before encaptured into that moment of now, and the next few moments are also captured into the now. Now the time of now, how long is now? I can't remember what Husserl said. I think he said it varies between 3 and 10 seconds or something, I think he said. But I know other more contemporary writers have put it all sorts of different times, and there's been some kind of neuroscientific suggestion that it's something like 300 to a second or 300 milliseconds. That's 300 to a second, isn't it? Yeah. But who knows? I mean, the key point is, I guess, from my perspective, is that this now contains a slice of time, and if I can just feed that back into this model of thoughts kind of sweeping through the brain, sweeping into and out of concepts, what that moment of now kind of represents is that whilst I'm thinking of a tree, for that second, that momentary moment of now, as my thoughts move through the concept of tree, as that pattern of activation sweeps through my brain, through that part of my brain which instantiates tree in some way, then there is a moment, and my experience of now captures a slice of that activation pattern, not just the leading edge of it, so to speak. It captures a few neurons back, my immediate momentary memory of it, if you like, but also captures and anticipates some of the multiple ways in which that thought pattern might move. So whilst my thoughts are moving towards trees, moving towards parts of the brain with trees in them, they have this weird kind of shape. I'm kind of imagining it like a V shape, actually, like a thing moving through my brain, that kind of shape, with the past being a kind of single line represented by my arm in this this demonstration, with the past represented by this kind of linear pathway, which was the previous activation pattern, which led up to that moment, and then it kind of widening out at the front. So the front end of now, if you like, this kind of bell-shaped or trumpet-shaped and funnel-shaped, and it's heading outward in that direction, and it's that kind of shape which is sweeping through these concepts, and that's kind of how I sort of see how a more sort of vernacular view of day-to-day life, actually. I mean, certainly when I look at my past, and I'm changing the terms of reference completely dramatically here, but never mind. When I look at my past, I know pretty much for a fact that there's only one of them. Certainly on this walk I've had with the dogs this morning, I've only taken one path. My past is unitary, it's singular, it leads all the way back to my house ultimately, back to my meeting with the other dogs, Barney, and the other dogs I've met, and leads up the lane and back to my front door. But the path forward, the future of my consciousness, if you like, or the future path of my existence, is more bell-shaped, more funnel-shaped, leading forwards. So there are a very, very limited number of things that are likely to happen to me in the next 2 seconds. In fact, I can tell you right now that in about 3 seconds' time, I'll be 10 feet ahead of me along this walk. And I know exactly which clump of grass I'm going to be standing on. Here it comes. There it is. 20 seconds ahead, there's a bit more variation. In fact, I'm not really sure I could guess which clump of grass I'm going to be standing on in 20 seconds' time. But I know I'm going to be in this field. In 10 minutes, I'll probably be over the other side of the canal, over there somewhere. But I might not be. I might meet somebody on the road. The dog might come along. I might get a phone call. All sorts of things might happen. So the patterns are starting to open up there. The activation patterns of my life, so to speak. And 24 hours a day, a week, a month, a year, 20 years. God, I might be on planet Mars in 20 years' time. I'll probably be under the ground in 20 years' time. Who knows? I've no idea at all. So again, just echoing that possible pattern of activation that's going through the neurons of the brain, in which each moment of now has this kind of funnel shaped, in which the exit points of any particular neuron are multiple, but the entry points are singular, but we experience that as a slice of that entry and exit as now. So that seems to be repeated on a grander scale in terms of how we see our lives, and we seem to have this constant funnel, this constant delta that we seem to be walking down and seem to be holding out in front of us at all times.